What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boyce, and you're here for another Facts Project review. Today, we're going to be covering Image Comics' Assorted Crisis Events. Of course, written by Deniz Camp, artwork done by Eric Zawadzki, colorist Jordi Belair, and lettering done by Hassan Otsmane El Hal. Now, I've now come to the conclusion because of the particular projects that Deniz Camp has been involved with, whether it's been the Ultimates, Absolute Martian Manhunter, and particularly with his own creator-owned work with Assorted Crisis Events, that he's a lot smarter than the rest of us. And the way that him and Eric Zawadzki have detailed the first two issues of this particular book, and I also got to say that Tom Mueller, who was one of the designing font writers and graphic artists on the House of X series, is also particularly a part of this project. That's where most of these bold prints particularly come from, which I think are pretty classic. But Deniz Camp has created a storyline for Image Comics that reads like an anthology. As a matter of fact, when you read the liner notes, it is detailed as such. But the first issue kind of course, went around the whole construct of characters by the name of Ashley. And I'm going to include him in this because he's pivotal to the plot. And that is Mr. Sulieman, who is the grocer who owns a corner store in the middle of the street. Now, the way that this is particularly set up, Ashley wakes up in the morning and she's not necessarily sure what time of the day she's in. She's not sure what year it is. Is she in World War III or World War IV? There's people trapped in time loops. There's cyborg soldiers walking around. There's medieval knights running around. There's Victorian debutantes walking into cell phone stores, not understanding exactly what the hell is going on, nor does Ashley. But the thing is, Ashley seems to be numb to it. And that seems to be a particular focal point of this entire series. And especially when we get into issue 2, when you're going by your day-to-day life and certain things are happening around you that are demonstrative, that are atypical of the way that your government is run, that is pretty much ill-conclusive of how the treatment of humanity is going throughout the entirety of their day. And yet, there's nothing that you can do about it because, Ashley first walks out that day and she knows that it's literally a horror film outside. And yet, all while this is happening, because it looks the way that it does, a Hollywood set of a TV show or a movie is being filmed on her block because of how crazy it looks. It looks like the perfect setting for where you would want a sci-fi horror to happen. And she has to walk through this every day, and she goes to work every day. She does not know what time it is when she gets off of work. She does not know what time it is when she wakes up in the morning. And it doesn't necessarily get real until the death of Mr. Sulieman, to where she thinks it's a movie happening, and it's not. It's literally her everyday life. And then we get into issue 2, and we get introduced to Jesus and the death of his father, Alfonso, and you're perplexed as to the grouping of a man who does not understand the fight and the plight of his immigrant father until he ultimately passes away. The grieving had to hit a lot further down the line in order for him to understand what happens. Jesus has difficulties finding a job because he is an immigrant. He starts working at a butcher shop, a slaughterhouse, a meat grinding factory, and he's being told that, this is good work for a good man. And his father used to work at this slaughterhouse. And you're understanding this as somebody who is living below the means of poverty and is living below those lines, and the things that you have to go through in order to provide for your family. Issue 2 was not necessarily, it just brings you there. Your mind is taken somewhere else. It's little Jesus being in church, trying to understand religion as a little child, and then also gravitating to the way that Eric Zawadzki actually details it. There's particular panels that go from Jesus's childhood to Jesus's present day, like his past to his present day, understanding the blood of Jesus and then transitioning that to a cow bleeding out in a slaughterhouse, to where he's on the kill floor understanding how to work in a butcher shop, and he's mutilating cows every day or bulls every day in order to supply food to the thousands or millions of homes, because he works at this slaughterhouse. And the person that is his boss in this place is like, he calls it like the promised land. It's an interesting sequence. There's sequences where you're like trying to understand that like Jesus is queasy because he sees blood for the first time, and then it leads to his birth, the birth of his child. And you start to see these like little fragments to where he wasn't too sure he understood his father growing up. His father was an immigrant. He drank a lot. He fought tooth and nail for his son to have a better life. His son still doesn't understand that until he gets a family of his own. But by the time he gets a family of his own, his father ultimately passes away. And then the flashes of certain things that are happening, like he's, although he works in that slaughterhouse, he's also realizing that this cow had a life at one point in time. It was a calf that was born into this. It did not ask to be slaughtered inside of this food chain type slaughterhouse in order for all of us to survive. It ultimately, at the end of the day, all animals want to do is just live a full life, not get trapped inside of like a meat grinder one day and ultimately being put down in order for us to have nourishment. And it's I think I now understand. Like I said earlier, I think Deniz is a lot smarter than a lot of us. And how this particularly goes to where he ultimately got into this country, crying as a little kid in the river, to where his father had him floating on like a pile of garbage so he wouldn't be crying in the middle of his river. And they ultimately were looking for a better life. And then that did happen. Like, Jesus ultimately gets that particular thing that his father wanted for him. But at the end of the day, his father is not there to see it anymore because he ultimately perished from this. So when we get to that funeral scene, it's like Jesus doesn't understand the sadness that has happened, but his mother totally gets it because she was riding with him the entire time. The series as a whole, this particular issue 2, was so strong and powerful that I'm almost, how can you go higher? But then I have to understand that, like, you know, this man not only has done the Ultimates, and he's done Absolute Martian Manhunter, and has created complex series to be sort of simplified in a way. And the fact that this is done in an anthology mode, I think is perfect, because you're pretty much committing 26 to 29 pages to distinctive characters about their fight or flight, of how they've survived throughout. Like, are you becoming so numb to the world that you don't know how to fight? Or better yet, you're not there to champion the people who made you who you are. Like, there's a particular panel in this where his father's drunk and he's like, fuck him. He does this every weekend. We should just leave him here. He can find his own way home. And his mother slaps the shit out of him. And it's like, you don't understand what he went through. Like, the suffering and probably the PTSD that this man has currently right now is all the while you sit on your own 2 feet and are able to live the life that you want. His pain, he has to suffer as much as he can in order for you to enjoy your happiness. And because the death of his father was so anguishing and so painful, his mother died only a few months after that. And you start to see that him being on that kill floor, him working as hard as he did, and you start to see the struggles of what his father went through, and ultimately what happened to his mother, who more so died of a broken heart. is starting to happen to him. Everything is a cycle. The cycle of that calf being born will ultimately turn into a cow or a bull who ends up in that slaughterhouse and dying. Ends up being the cycle of his father traveling to a foreign country with his son and his wife and trying to fight for a better life. But ultimately, when you do fight for a better life, you still have to suffer through the death of your loved ones. But ultimately, in order for them to have that betterment of life, that dream that they focused on for so long, it still remains a continuous whirlwind. And now Jesus has to go through that. Like, I think there was a scene at the mother's funeral where he doesn't even know if he's going to be able to pay for the funeral. You know, his father just died a few months back. His mother just dies that day. You know, like he's at the funeral. The funeral home is asking him for dough, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. And I feel like this is just a perfect story moving forward. I look forward to all issues of this. The fact that it's an anthology, I know I'm going to get introduced to somebody brand new for issue 3. So for all of us here at the Facts Project, can't wait to talk to you guys for issue 3. See us next time on the channel.